It's My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast, and welcome to it. We got kind of a big show this week, and a show that kind of came out of nowhere. So, we're going to continue with the Rewatching series of a Star Wars podcast. This week, we'll be focusing on The Empire Strikes Back. We did cover The Empire Strikes Back a couple of podcasts back with the 40th anniversary of the film, but this will kind of be the official rewatching of The Empire Strikes Back. On top of that, brand new video game reveal that I am so excited about. You have absolutely no idea. I have details about that. Saving the 3 3/4 inch line of action figures. I'm a massive collector. We don't talk Star Wars toys very often on the show. And I think my voice cracked for just a moment there a second ago. We don't talk Star Wars toys very often on the show, but we will because there is a petition out. I'm not big on petitions, but this one's kind of fun. And maybe you can help out us collectors by saving the 3 3/4 inch action figure line from Hasbro. Plus your listener feedback. The show is brought to you by mynerdworld.net. Hey, that's me, along with the author of the EMBARK series. Hey, that's also me, and I have an amazing deal going on right now in the opening trilogy to the EMBARK series that I will share with you at the end of today's show. Speaking of today's show, let's go ahead and get to it. What do you say?
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
The Star Wars Podcast, and I'm your host, Jon Justice. Glad you are with the show this week. I am so excited about doing the show. The past couple of weeks of doing my regular job, which I love, as a full-time radio news talk show host, has been really difficult. I'm not going to lie. I normally, in the 24, 25 years that I've been doing radio, the news doesn't usually get to me. I can brush it off pretty easily and not take it home. But the past few weeks, I'm not going to lie, man, it's been daunting. So was really excited to do the show this week. I wish that I could talk Star Wars full time for a living. That would be amazing. I'm really grateful to have and blessed to have the job that I have. But man, it's not been fun. This is fun. And I got a lot of great stuff to share with you this week. Before we get started, first off, I hope you're healthy. I hope you are happy, and I hope you are you are safe. I do want to mention, please stick around. At the end of the show, after listener feedback for just a moment, I want to talk a little bit about my books, my EMBARK space opera science fiction series that are available at mynerdworld.net. If you haven't picked up the books yet, I have a really amazing offer going on right now for a limited time that I want to share with you on the ebooks. Plus, some changes to the paperbacks, information on the audiobook for book 3, and a little bit about what's coming in the near future. Remember to sign up for the mailing list. The mailing list is all things My Nerd World. I do not send out emails very often, maybe like once a month. I might increase the frequency as time goes on. You will not get spam. You will just get details on upcoming projects, what's happening with the podcast, what's happening with the books, and special deals and stuff like that. So if you're not a part of the mailing list yet, all you have to do is email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, and just say, hey, put me on the mailing list, and I will add you to the mailing list. It really is that easy. All right, let's get to the show. And this ends up being a bit of a leak, even though an official announcement was made shortly after the leak. So the article that I'm going to read to you is based off the leak, but we do have official information. Let's not waste any more time.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
All right, we'll start off with a couple of fun items, and that includes the reveal that Electronic Arts, EA, has a brand new Star Wars game coming called Star Wars Squadrons. All right, if you listen to the show for any length of time, you know that I'm a massive vehicle fan. It's part of the inspiration of why I wrote my stories, my EMBARK stories. I love spaceships. I love all space vehicles. I can play Battlefront 2 Fighter Squadron for hours on end and never, ever, 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 ever get bored. This game has me through the moon excited. All right, the publisher is going to start teasing the new release from its EA Motive Studio soon, and they have. Coming up on Monday, we are set to get the official full trailer for the game itself on Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And I want to do, before I get further into the details on this game, I want to do a quick shout out to my friend John Poliska. I work with John at iHeart here in Minneapolis, and he sent me an email today. I haven't seen him for 3 months plus because of this ridiculous pandemic. But what's really funny, he doesn't know this. He's going to find out now because I know he listens to the show. But we, through whatever reason, and partly because of this pandemic, we've been losing copy machines in the building. We had a main copy machine by the front desk. It died before the pandemic started. So I go back into the sales department, which is at the other end of the floor that I work in the building that I work, from where the studios are. And one of those copy machines broke. But there's 2 of them that I used to visit. Now there's only 1. They're right in front of my friend John Poliska's office. So every morning when I come in to make copies of our show prep, I see his closed door and I get a little sad because I miss seeing my friend. But he emailed me today and he wanted to know my thoughts on Star Wars Squadrons. And he says, I saw it on Twitter. I know you love your ships. Can't recall how much of a gamer you are. I am. But I played the old X-Wing and TIE series on PC back in the day and would love to see a return to flight combat in a Star Wars game. So, John, this is your response to your email since I didn't write you back yet because I knew I was going to do the podcast today. So, all right, back to the details on here. A leak on the Xbox website is spilling the details faster than a group of bots and spies, according to this article from Vulture. This is the rumored Star Wars project Maverick that first leaked onto the PlayStation Network in March. EA will likely have much more to say about this during its upcoming EA Play event on June 18th, and as we found out, we're actually going to find out on Monday morning. According to sources familiar with the game's production, Star Wars Squadrons is an aerial space combat game about piloting ships in head-to-head battles. It features a single-player campaign, which has me stoked, but the main focus for Squadrons is on the multiplayer. The idea is to get players fighting against each other in team battles featuring iconic Star Wars vessels. Based off the cover art only shows, at the moment, original trilogy vehicles. My guess would be, and I haven't gone, this is my first time reading the article, so we're all finding out about this together. My guess would be that that's probably based on the campaign, and that I would hope that once we get into the game and we get into the multiplayer aspect of it, much like Battlefront 2, we would see ships from all different eras. EA plans to release the game for PC and consoles this fall. Motive previously worked on Star Wars Battlefront 2. It was the studio responsible for the single-player campaign. It also assisted BioWare on Anthem. Now Motive is stepping out as the lead developer on Star Wars Squadrons. It's worth noting that this game is a direct result of EA wanting to release a new Star Wars game relatively quickly. Executives deemed other Star Wars projects too ambitious or requiring too many years of development. So set your expectations accordingly, according to the article. Is EA getting the hang of making Star Wars games? The article asks. For EA, Star Wars Squadrons is part of an ongoing effort to capitalize on the Star Wars property. The publisher has had a number of false starts with Disney sci-fi fantasy IP. Dead Space developer Visceral was going to build an Uncharted-style Star Wars game before EA pulled the plug and shuttered the studio. But internally, EA has squashed a number of projects that were still in the early phases of development. These included ideas for Star Wars Battlefront spin-off, an open galaxy scoundrel simulator, both of which EA Vancouver was working on. It's not unusual for publishers to spin up big projects and then abandon or adapt them into something else. Famously, Blizzard delayed its Titan MMO and then turned it into Overwatch. More recently, however, EA has seen some success with Star Wars. It released Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is a critical and commercial hit. We're going to get a part 2 with that. EA also closed out 2 years of ongoing support for Star Wars Battlefront 2, which rebounded from a rough start to garner an engaged community. Now it's time to see if Squadrons can bolster the argument for EA to continue making Star Wars games in the future. Look, I'm really excited about this game. It's kind of a bummer for me because I really liked the gameplay in Battlefront 1. When I first started playing Battlefront 2, I had a really difficult time at first sort of adjusting to the way the controllers were working. And then once I got the hang of it, I enjoyed it way more than I did Battlefront 1. It bums me out, though, because you can kind of go back and do some of the arcade stuff on Battlefront 1, but there's very few people playing it anymore. On top of that, the one thing in Battlefront 1 I'll mention was the map that they had for the Death Star was incredible. That, to me, was just a childhood nostalgia dream come true. But it was one of those maps where you could only go and play that map if it spun up in the random choice when you were playing multiplayer. And maybe I need to go back and revisit it again and see if anybody's out there playing it still, because I haven't. I actually pulled the install from the console a while back. But I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the maps on the original Battlefront 1 too, even though most of them were in atmosphere gameplay. But this has me really excited. Again, from a personal standpoint, because vehicles are one of my favorite things about Star Wars, this just has me really, 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 really jacked. So, what do you think? Again, we don't talk games very much, and we certainly don't talk toys. We're going to do that just a little bit here in a moment, but be curious if you're excited for this in the least bit. Email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, and let me know what you think.
When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power. And beyond that, something truly special.
You know, we're going to watch Artemis Fowl tonight on Disney Plus, and then I was debating on. I have a bunch of movies set aside that I've been wanting to watch as of late, but that really makes me want to watch The Last Jedi, so I might do that a little bit later on tonight. All right, really quick, I was turned on to this particular Change.org petition from the Galaxy of Toys podcast, which if you're a toy collector, it's a really, really fun podcast to listen to. It's a little it doesn't. They don't record all the time, so it's not very consistent. But when they do, and they just had a show that went up on June 3rd, it's a really, really enjoyable listen if you like collecting like I do. But if you do collect, you may or may not know this, but Hasbro all but discontinued the 3 3/4 inch line, the 5 POA, 5 points of articulation. This would be the size and the style that we got from the original trilogy films all the way up and through The Last Jedi. We still get the 3 3/4 inch figures, but they're now the vintage collection, and they have more points of articulation. So they're the same in size, and the sculpts are better, and you can position them better. But I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan of the 3 3/4 inch standard 5 points of articulation. And it was a bummer that we got so few characters for The Last Jedi. We got a decent amount considering how well the movie did of Solo. But I was really bummed out that we didn't get a full slate of 3 3/4 5 POA action figures for The Rise of Skywalker. And we got very few Rise of Skywalker figures. So there's a petition out there right now. If you look in the details, if you look in the notes for the podcast, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're listening on whatever app you're listening on, in the details of the podcast, there is a link available there. Also, there is a link available there to the interview in case you missed it with a good friend of the show, the Lowdown Show, Edwin Lowe, who's starting his own show that we did a couple of weeks back. And that link is still available to the YouTube video of our conversation as well. But this petition here says, persuade Hasbro to continue the 5 POA 3 3/4 inch Star Wars figures. Since their release in 1978, Star Wars fans have been collecting their beloved 3 3/4 inch 5 POA action figures that represent the iconic characters from the saga. Not only did this line mean a lot to fans, but it also revolutionized the movie merchandising and action figure market. As the Skywalker saga finally comes to a close, it seems like Hasbro may have decided to cancel this long-running and much-loved tradition. Admittedly, there have been problems with the franchise and the changing of the marketplace, which have resulted in negatively affected sales, according to the petition. There may have been some questionable character choices which did not appeal much to collectors or to children. Distribution and the release of figures seems patchy and a little arbitrary. Many collectors have struggled to find the figures they want on the primary market. There's also been a watering down of the line because of the glut of product in so many different scales. However, loyal fans have remained dedicated to this iconic line. This is an exciting time for Star Wars with the conclusion of the Skywalker saga and with the Mandalorian TV show. So we politely and desperately request that Hasbro does not give up hope on this incredibly important line and continues to produce figures in the scale for the dedicated and loyal fan base out there who've been collecting these figures for 40 years. And Hasbro's done some really unique things. They've built this full scale to the 3 3/4 inch line, Jabba sail barge, and they did sort of it wasn't crowdsourcing, but they basically said, if there's enough demand, we will make a selected number of these and sell them. And they did, a limited number. So perhaps there's a way in which if enough fans go and sign this petition and they know that there's enough people out there that'll purchase them, we can go maybe special order a limited quantity of particular of a particular series of characters that we just have not received in this line. So again, if you got a chance, just take a moment and go and maybe when you're done with the podcast and you go to purchase the ebooks of EMBARK while you're on the internet. You see what I did there? Yeah, it's kind of clever of me, huh? While you're on the internet, go to change.org. And again, the link is in the notes, but if you go to change.org and you just type in Star Wars action figures, Star Wars figures, you'll find the petition. And take a moment and go and check it out. So just put your name down there. Help out those of us that collect these toys, and would love to see more of these action figures come back. All right, let's move on, shall we?
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
All right, this brings us to the portion of the show of rewatching. We're in the middle of the original trilogy. If you are new to the show, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the rewatching of the prequel trilogy as we move through all the movies. And I share some things you may not know about the films, my thoughts about the films, the parts of the movie, and my history with them that really stick out to me. I spent a lot of time, as I mentioned at the start of the show, talking about The Empire Strikes Back a couple of episodes back. So in rewatching The Empire Strikes Back, which I recently did, I basically just jotted down a few notes and some things that I didn't cover in the anniversary episode of The Empire Strikes Back. And specifically, some of the reasons, in my opinion, why this movie was so special. And it was uniquely special to me as a young, between 8 and 10-year-old, seeing this movie. As I mentioned many times on the show, my first memory of seeing a trailer on TV was sitting on the shaggish carpet of the living room in the house that we lived in Arcadia, California, on Tree Lane Avenue, on a little tiny, smaller than a probably 12-inch screen, or maybe it was a 19, but a small screen. And I just remember seeing the Vader mask and the blue Empire Strikes Back logo pop up. And this was really my first experience into seeing what a sequel could be, and seeing something that was familiar to this movie that I love so much, but then it was different. It's got a different title. This is Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. What does that mean? I mean, it was all just so mysterious and strange. And not being familiar with movies, right? Just watching kids' films. These were the first sort of adult-themed pieces of content and entertainment that I experienced as a child, and they were really grown up. And The Empire Strikes Back was really grown up, and it really did a number on me in a positive way as a kid, of sort of putting aside preconceived notions of how things were supposed to be and perception. The idea of the bad guys kicking butt and the good guys getting their butts kicked. These were little lessons in the film that as a very, very young child, and as I got older and spent more time with this film, really did sort of form my opinion on things. And the movie challenged me as a kid. And I really think it challenged a lot of kids my age. It challenged the way that we watched films and the themes and the father-son relationships. You go to the beginning of the movie, and as I mentioned before, the start of that film is very, very special and unique because, and I'll repeat what I said on the other Empire Strikes Back show, but I really do feel that the Empire Strikes Back is cemented in so many fans' minds as being the best Star Wars movie, not just because it's such a fantastic film, but it was the first one, and then that ushered in this era of how we watched a new Star Wars movie going forward. Wide-eyed optimism, excitement, and nervousness. That opening shot and the music, dun 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 dun, and then the pods coming out of the Star Destroyer. I mean, it's just iconic. I mean, to talk about a nostalgic memory burn. But you get into the film and Han Solo going out after Luke. This character that we love so much in Luke Skywalker in the first movie, the movie opens with him being attacked by a monster. And then Han Solo risking his own life to go out and save him. Han Solo grabbing the lightsaber and cutting open the Tauntaun. And then as a kid, trying to kind of work out, wait, did he just shove Luke Skywalker into... Did he just shove him inside of the Tauntaun? And I guess that makes sense. It would keep him warm, but it smells really bad, right? It redefined the villain in Darth Vader, right? Humanizing Vader. You know, here you think, you don't know, is he a robot? Is he not a robot? He's machine now more than man, twisted and evil. This is all we knew in the original film. And then you find out that he's actually, spoiler alert, Luke's dad. And suddenly now we've humanized him. There's a real person underneath there, and especially at that age, because you know you're going on that 8 to 10 years old, and then you're 11, 12, and 13. And I'm going through that with my 13-year-old right now. I mean, that's the age when you adhere yourself to your father, right? When you connect and you reach out for that male bond with your dad. My parents ended up getting a divorce, in that time period. And my father became even more important, which as I got older and I watched the film more and I appreciated it more, as I got into my preteens and early teens, suddenly now this relationship with the father and son takes on a whole new meaning because of what I'm going through in my own life. The Vader Boba Fett Bespin dinner capture scene blew my mind as a kid. This idea that they set up this extravagant dinner, the ultimate bad guy in Darth Vader, captures our heroes, and they're going to sit down and have a meal with him? Right? I mean, these are things now that are kind of almost to the point of movie tropes, but back then you're kind of like, wait, what? This is a bad guy. They're going to make him sit down and eat with the bad guy? What in the heck is going on? I mean, again, it was so challenging as a young kid in this movie. I mean, it was just mind-blowing stuff. All right, moving forward, a couple of things that I didn't realize, and this is something that I only found out about the film within the past few years. I didn't realize that the whole reason, and it was funny because I never really thought about it watching the movie, when they tortured Han Solo on Cloud City, right, on Bespin, up until like 2 years ago, I never really gave it a second thought. I always thought it was a little odd. Why are they torturing him? I had always made the assumption, my headcanon, up until I found out why this really happened, my headcanon was that they were doing something to him to prepare him to be frozen in carbonite. Well, we now know that's not true at all. Well, and I'll tell you what the real reason is if you don't know. We obviously know that's not true from The Mandalorian, because The Mandalorian freezes those suckers right inside of those freezing chambers on board the Razor Crest. But the whole reason that Han was tortured was because Vader wanted to elicit a response from Luke and knew that Luke would feel his friends in pain. I never picked up on that. When Luke has the vision on Dagobah with Yoda, they're in pain. he's seeing that they're in pain because Vader is torturing Han. I mean, how screwed up was that? And again, they had to have dinner with him. It's so awful, right? The other thing that really stuck out to me, and I actually did a little bit of looking on this, and it doesn't seem like this has actually been that Lucas, at least not that I saw on a cursory Google search. It doesn't seem like Lucas has ever really fully answered this question. But after Vader chops off Luke's hand and he allows himself to fall, right, and he falls into the hole before he ends up on the weather vane, right? Did Luke try to go and kill himself? And I saw some interesting commentary on Reddit about this a moment ago before I started the show. And there was a lot of commentary sort of surrounding people's assumption was, well, you know, he was letting the Force decide what was going to happen, right? You know, and he would, well, you know, either the Force is going to save me or the Force isn't going to save me. But he couldn't hang there, and he couldn't bring himself to join his father, who he just found out was the evil Sith Lord of the galaxy. So instead, he's like, fine, dude, you know what? I'm just going to drop, and I'm going to let the Force carry me. And we've seen similar circumstances like that sort of echo in other Star Wars content. But again, as a kid, it's just like, wait, what? Luke just let himself fall? How do you know he's going to fall in the hole, right? It changed our perception of sequels, and it challenged me as to what entertainment could do. I will never, ever forget getting to the end of the movie, Luke getting his mechanical hand, and the music beginning to just soar, right, on the medical frigate. And the camera's beginning to back out, and, you know, and Lando and Chewie are off, you know, heading off into some nebula to go find Han, and I'm like, this can't be the end of the movie, right? This can't be. And then, you know, dun, 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 and then the directed by George Lucas pops up, and you're like, what? Again, as a kid, seeing this in the theater with a cliffhanger, I never experienced that before, right? I can't believe it. I gotta wait for another movie. And it was as maddening as a kid as it was thrilling, right? Because the anticipation for stuff is so great, right? It's part of the fun. It's part of what's so exciting. We paid off our trip. We paid in full our trip to Disneyland coming up in August. That is supposed to be the same week as Celebration, even though they haven't canceled it yet. I know most likely they will. But we contacted Disney, and we've got our reservations, and we've got our tickets, and they're opening the parks back up at limited capacity. And we're going to spend 4 days. I'm almost going to cry thinking about how excited I am to take my family on this vacation. It's been, growing up in Southern California and having gone to the parks countless of times, having an annual pass for a number of years, but having not been there in 5 years now, going on my 5th year of not having been there. I'm so excited to be going back, and the anticipation of that is so great, right? But again, the end of The Empire Strikes Back, and that idea that I can't believe that we have to wait, right? And Irving Kershner made the comment in the documentary, in The Empire of Dreams. He's like, it wasn't this grand ending; it was an emotional ending. The movie completely sort of flip-flops the tropes of films, starting off with the big battle in the beginning, and then leading to this emotional, finale. And it really did shape the way that I perceive movies and judge films going forward and forever. And those are just a few of the sort of added reasons why The Empire Strikes Back is such a special film. I can't wait to get into the sequel trilogy in rewatching, because I've got so many new things that I want to share, not just about The Force Awakens, but definitely The Last Jedi and definitely The Rise of Skywalker. I will continue to tout how much I love that film and what a great job I think that Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams did with that finale, and how in my view, they nailed that ending in a way that I didn't expect they were going to. All right, so I got a few more things to talk about with The Empire Strikes Back. 10 things from Wired you probably didn't know about Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. Let's all find out together, shall we? So, Yoda was apparently originally named Buffy. According to Wired, in Lucas's earliest outlines for the sequel, Luke meets a supernatural entity called Buffy, or Bundin de Banin. So here's how Lucas described it. Buffy is very old, 3,000 to 4,000 years old. Kyber crystal in a sword. Buffy shows Luke. Buffy the Guardian, feel not think. Lucas concludes by saying that Luke will become the chosen one, the human Buffy. In later drafts, he thought of Yoda as kind of a small frog, and Yoda had a full name. It was Minch Yoda, right? In the earliest script draft, Minch has the immortal line, Skywalker, Skywalker, and why do you come to walk my sky with the sword of a Jedi Knight? I remember another Skywalker. So I knew Minch. I didn't know Buffy. I think I remember hearing Buffy a long time ago, but that's not one that really gets out there all that often. And you got to take a little bit of these sort of facts with a grain of salt, because a lot of this stuff comes from super early drafts, so they kind of pick and choose. That Buffy may have been a passed off thing that got abandoned really early on, because Minch I've heard quite often. Lucas considered having a scene where Luke gets his face injured. Mark Hamill was injured in a car accident in 1977 and had to have his face reconstructed. So for a while, Lucas planned on including a sequence in where he gets his face damaged. And we see it getting patched up by a droid. There's actually, this got as far as filming. There's a set picture showing a droid bandaging Luke's face, but it was cut of the movie. And we kind of get an explanation about why Mark Hamill looks a little bit different in The Empire Strikes Back, because when he gets attacked by the Wampa. Luke's journey to becoming a Jedi Knight would have had a lot more bumps. One idea that was tossed around in the early stages of planning The Empire Strikes Back was the notion that Luke's lightsaber had a crystal hidden in the hilt with a secret encrypted information on it, including the coordinates to Minch Yoda's planet. Luke would have been humiliated when he couldn't use the Force to stop an attack by a bunch of ice monsters on the Rebels' Hoth base. Meanwhile, Vader senses that Luke used the Force to destroy the Death Star, and there's a new wannabe Jedi in town. So Vader uses telepathy to choke Luke in his spacecraft, nearly killing him, except R2-D2 jumps the ship into hyperspace and takes it to Yoda's planet. We would have visited other planets, possibly including a water planet with an underwater city and a city planet. With a whole planet built over it. And of course, we ended up getting a lot of these things like later on, right? We got Camino. We ended up getting the underwater city in The Phantom Menace, right? The city planet is obviously Coruscant. Darth Vader would have a castle. It would have been an evil fortress in some versions, surrounded by lava and full of gargoyles who were Vader's pets. Obviously, that came to fruition in Rogue One, and I love Vader's castle in Rogue One, by the way. I was actually bummed we didn't. I was bummed we didn't get that in The Rise of Skywalker. I think that would have been rad. I got rad in there. Vader was not Luke's father at first. In Lee Brackett's first script, Luke meets his real dad, who he says sent away Luke and his secret sister for their own safety. Luke, Leia, Han love triangle was a much bigger deal in the earlier drafts of the script. It's at the root of Luke's struggle for self-respect and his humiliations. Okay. When Darth Vader is trying to win Luke over to the dark side in the second draft, written by Lucas himself, Vader says, "You're in love with Leia. You don't want to lose her to Han Solo." But obviously, that ended up getting changed. And let me say for the record, that right there, okay, and I think I might have this. This might be a part of listener feedback this week, but it might not be. But to all those individuals, my own personal take, to all those individuals who talk about how the sequel trilogy wasn't planned out and it's not good because it wasn't planned out, neither was the original trilogy. Lucas was a pantser. There's two different types of authors. You have plotters and you have pantsers. Lucas was kind of a combination of both. Plotters are individuals that plot out their whole plot and then they go write their stories. Pantsers are those who fly by the seat of their pants. I'm a pantser. I write my stories based off of what I want to see happen next and what I think would be most exciting to see on the big screen, right? I write books for people who love movies because I love movies. That's what I do. But for the people that talk about it wasn't planned out, Lucas was making it up as he goes along too. All right. The film posed unique challenges for special effects and model work. Darth Vader had a new Star Destroyer, which was supposed to be 16 miles long, and they built a full-size Millennium Falcon, which was 65 feet wide and 80 feet long. Also, ILM had to start the new stop-motion animation department just to make the Imperial Walkers and Tauntauns work. A lot of this is stuff we know already, and of course, the challenge of Yoda. Stanley Kubrick nearly killed the movie, Empire was sharing studio space with The Shining, and there was a huge fire that burned down Stage 3 at Elstree Studios, destroying the Shining sets. Okay? I got to adjust something here. My apologies for stopping. There we go. All right. That meant the Empire had to give up some of its own studio space, and The Shining went way over schedule, especially as Kubrick used the delay as an excuse to rethink his whole movie. Time-wise, it's doubtful the picture will recover, one crew member wrote at the time, but of course that didn't happen, and thank the good Lord Almighty. Miss Piggy had a cameo in one of Yoda's first scenes in rehearsal. When Mark Hamill first met Frank Oz, he asked him to do a brief Miss Piggy cameo during rehearsals on set as a practical joke. But when the time came much later, it even caught Hamill off guard. During one scene, Yoda tells Luke to follow his feelings. Luke protests that he has followed his feelings, and suddenly Frank Oz whips out the Miss Piggy puppet, saying, "Feelings, you want feelings? Get behind the couch and I'll show you feelings, punk." What is this hole? I've been booked into dumps before, but never like this. Give me my agent on the phone. So that's kind of funny. All right, so that wraps up Rewatching for this week on the show. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'll tell you what, show's not done yet, though, because we have listener feedback to get to.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Friend of the show, Brian Martin, as he does most every week, sent me a series of different questions, and so we'll run through them really quick. Why do you suppose The Rise of Skywalker is the worst reviewed Star Wars movie on Rotten Tomatoes aside from The Clone Wars? That's a good question. My only guess is those are people's opinion, right? That's the easy answer. But I think the reality is a little bit more muddled. I think part of the reason is if you look at social networking, how big social networking has gotten in the course of of these past few years. You could argue, right, that it's at its height when The Rise of Skywalker came out. We just came off The Last Jedi, which is arguably the most controversial. No, it's not even arguable. It is. It's the most controversial Star Wars film ever made, right? Still invites controversy to this day. And I think there's a lot of people that just want to slam Star Wars for the sake of slamming Star Wars. That's my take on it. I don't care because I adore that movie. He goes on to say, it's weird when people take every opportunity to bash the sequel trilogy, even when it makes little sense to do so. For example, there's a YouTube video, and there's a montage of events from the Clone Wars to the prequel trilogy, and the things that set up the events of the original trilogy. There are comments in the comment section like, the fact that you left out all of the Disney trilogy makes this video feel so much greater. This is the proof that the last three films are unnecessary, even though the sequel trilogy, Brian writes, has nothing to do with the very topic of the video. The sequel trilogy really doesn't have anything to do with the Clone Wars. The commentators are just using the lack of sequel trilogy footage in this video to make an excuse to bash the sequel trilogy once again. And the very person who made this video has made other Star Wars videos with sequel trilogy in them. I don't understand people sometimes. I don't either, and I can't relate to it because that's not me. I don't know the thrill that people get for bashing movies. I get not liking a film. There are some films, shockingly, that I don't like. But I don't understand the point of trashing him. That's something that never, ever gave me any kind of entertainment. Brian also asks, I know how you mentioned often Star Wars has always relied on ancillary material to explain things. Can you please give a few examples in the case of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy? Because there are YouTube comments like talking about how my favorite thing about episodes 1 through 6 is how the storyline was actually explained in the movies. The last 3 require you to go to the films, go home confused. Read all the books and comments they release after the movie. Rewatch the film to kind of understand what happened. It's as if it's homework to them. Okay, let me stop here. Whoever wrote that is completely wrong. Okay? That is just an ignorant person that wrote that. Okay? If you couldn't figure out episodes 7, 8, and 9, right? That's on you. The movies explain themselves. And you can easily go back and ask all kinds of questions of things that weren't explained originally in the original films that you only got answers for later on. For crying out loud, we are thrown into A New Hope on an episode 4 when we don't even know what happened in 1, 2, and 3 apart from the crawl. There's no explanation about how the ships fly in atmosphere, right? I mean, and again, I could spend the rest of the show talking about the number of things that get explained later on that aren't explained in the movie. In The Empire Strikes Back, how is it that Luke is suddenly communicating with Leia? They don't ever explain that. In A New Hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi goes and puts his hand on Luke's forehead, and we'll get into this a little bit later on in just a moment, because I'm grabbing this from the next comment. And we sort of take that as him using force healing. They never go and explain that. I just... Ignorant, again, people just want to complain for the sake of complaining, right? It's as if they're so bothered by the film they didn't like that they're trying to find justification for why they're bothered. It's okay to just not like something. To that point, David Pitts writes, I love this film and love this video. Thank you, David. He's actually commenting on a much older video that I did, on a much older podcast talking about The Rise of Skywalker. Earned a subscription. Thank you very much. By the way, I haven't mentioned this in a long time. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's really important, and I'd really appreciate it. Just click on it if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube. I don't know if you've touched on this before, but I haven't watched the whole video yet. I feel like people who have an issue with force healing in general need to realize the first ever force power we see in Star Wars is force healing. Thank you, David. Obi-Wan uses it on Luke right after Luke is hit in the head by the Tusken Raider. I'm sure I'll have more stuff to add, but I'll finish your video now. So nice to find some positivity with Star Wars and quality content. You need more subscriptions. I know I do, David. That's why I asked. All right, one more before we get to the end of the show. And don't go anywhere, because I got a special promotion for you. A friend of the show, Antifasuvi, says this. Thanks, John. Yep, a lot of naysayers' rationales seem to only address half of what is given in the sequel trilogy. It's like they stop paying attention to what something irritates them. And then they miss the real crux of whatever they're dissing. Alas, it reeks of immaturity, in my opinion, to be so short-sighted. But the fact that everyone develops at different rates is as human as the mature inclination for patience and compassion, which is what we'll have to practice until they come around or they simply stop beating a dead horse. Yes, you are 100% correct.
My nerd world.
All right, before we wrap the show up this week, EMBARK the Trilogy is now available at mynerdworld.net, which has recently been revamped. So, I would encourage you to go to mynerdworld.net if you haven't been in a while and check it out. There's a lot of really fun stuff on there. I do put all the videos up there. But there is a ton of concept art for the books. That is, if you're into that kind of thing, it's really cool to see what Tom Edwards, who does my cover art, how he goes from his initial sketches, and we collaborate and then come up with the final versions of the cover art. Plus, if you're into that kind of thing, the full covers without the graphics and stuff, without the lettering, right, and the spine and the book blurbs are on there too, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful pieces of art. It's one of the things that I didn't realize I would enjoy so much about writing these stories. It's obviously all about the content, but these covers that Tom does, they really are pieces of amazing art. I'm looking at the cover for The Vanishing War right now on my Apple iMac, and it just looks absolutely stunning and gorgeous to see the ships that he creates based off of my descriptions. It's just incredible. So if you're not familiar with my stories, here's a quick rundown on all three books. In EMBARK Book 1, the greatest technological advancement ever made has gone missing. Earth is at risk, and the hunt is on to find the only hope for humanity's survival. It takes place in the future, where flight culture, air and space flight culture, has replaced car culture. Our protagonist, Taft Guardia, fights with his friends to save humanity, and the girl he loves, headstrong Keitha Morrow. This is an exciting space opera, again, for those who love movies, and it really is a mix of everything I love in sci-fi and what I grew up with. Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, The Fast and the Furious, Ready Player One, Say Anything, those 80s and early 90s teen movies. That's the love story at the core of this whole thing. When you get to Book 2, EMBARK, Treasure in Darkness, after having survived the planet-wide apocalypse on Earth, Taft, Keitha, and their friends are now in a far-off world, and they must unravel the mystery of a new lethal threat to their way of life. Right? Book 2, Treasure in Darkness, is really sort of my Empire Strikes Back of the series. I wanted to make a very personal story about these characters in the midst of, and keeping it fast-paced. If you get through book one and you go, the first half was a little slow, but it picks up later on. A lot of people say that. Trust me when I tell you, and people that have read them will agree, books 2 and 3 are pretty much go from the start of the book. So pacing on them, I was really, really happy with the way that turned out. And then the recently released EMBARK, The Vanishing War, Book 3, The Only Way the Raider Alliance Can Stop the Ruthless Galactic Dictator Sent Argum is with the Truth. The question is, will humanity in a far-off galaxy believe them? The subtext of these 3 books, and if you read them, you know this, the subtext of these 3 books really does mirror the divisions that we're currently facing here, on Earth, and especially in America. And that was kind of the point of what I wanted to do. I was inspired by George Lucas in what he was inspired by. If you've been watching any of the Mandalorian Gallery episodes, I thought it was really cool when Jon Favreau, the showrunner for The Mandalorian, said that he didn't want to be inspired. He wanted to be inspired, and he was inspired by George Lucas and what he did. But what he really was inspired by when he made The Mandalorian was the things that inspired George Lucas. Right? Kurosawa, those samurai films, those serial shows that he watched when he was a kid. I wanted to take a similar approach when I wrote these books, but I wanted to be influenced by George Lucas and thereby being influenced by the things that influenced him. But mine were more influenced by what George Lucas did and the times that we live in. George Lucas, when he did the original trilogy, was very much inspired, especially with the Return of the Jedi, by what was happening in Vietnam. And of course, when you look at the prequel trilogy, there's a lot of what happened in sort of a post-9/11 world within those stories. I really wanted to take what was happening inside of our world right now and embed it in these books, and that's exactly what I did, and I feel like I was successful in doing that. So, I say all this because if you go to mynerdworld.net and you click the link right there on the homepage, it's yellow and black, it'll send you to where you can get all 3 books. Right now, for a limited time, you can get all 3 ebooks at a discounted price now through Wednesday. I have a countdown deal going on. So, right now, book 1 for the ebook is 99 cents, and that'll stay at 99 cents. But books 2 and 3 are currently right now on Friday, and then into, I believe, the beginning of Saturday, they will be at $1.99, and then they will increase incrementally every day until they return to their normal price of $4.99 between now and Wednesday. So, if you want to support My Nerd World, and you like sci-fi, and you like the stuff that I mentioned, and this podcast, go and purchase the books for you and a friend. You or a friend. This is how you can go and support the show. And get the books right now, especially the ebooks, at the discounted price. Also, I want to mention, if anybody's into this kind of thing, the paperbacks are now exclusively available with matte covers. I got a couple of promotional versions. I got a couple of versions of the book in matte covers as opposed to the glossy, and I really love the way the matte covers look. So you can get now the paperbacks in matte covers on Amazon.com. The audiobook for The Vanishing War will be coming in the next 3 weeks. I'm finishing the editing for it this weekend, and then all I have to do is do a couple of the final listens of the audio to make sure that it's clean, and then I'll be posting it up on Audible. And then all we'll have to do is wait for them to approve it, which usually takes a week to a couple of weeks. So, go to mynerdworld.net. Pick up a copy of the ebooks at their discounted price right now for you or a friend. Support this podcast and get some, hours of fantastic space opera reading. The reviews have been fantastic, and I'll end on this. Make sure if you have read the books, please go to Amazon.com and leave a positive review. I need all the reviews I can get for all 3 books. So even if you don't purchase the books for a friend, if you've already purchased them, thank you. Please, though, go to Amazon.com, and if you purchase the books, leave a positive review. It would just mean the absolute world to me. All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the show this week as much as I enjoyed recording it. I'm going to go and watch Artemis Fowl, and eat some pizza with my family before I watch some Star Wars later on tonight. I hope you are safe again. I hope you are well. I hope that you are that you're doing okay with everything that's going on in the world right now, and perhaps this was a bit of a distraction from all that, and maybe my EMBARK trilogy can be too. Talk to you again next week, where we will be rewatching Return of the Jedi, along with full details on Star Wars Squadrons, which I'm so excited about. All right, I got to wrap this up because I'm hungry. Thanks for listening. Talk to you again next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.